Right. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Mike.
Hey. Um, Thanks very much for agreeing to do this interview today. So you have fasted for 10 days, is that right?
That's right.
10
Eating now
days.
for eating
Yep.
now for five, I think, or four. Not that I'm counting, but since Saturday. So
Wow, that's incredible. So I thought it was a great opportunity to talk to you and maybe explore why you did this and how it went and the outcomes, etc. I thought we'd all be interested to learn about that. I'm keen to hear you share your experience. So you had no food for 10 days. So as they say in the pet food industry, nothing wet or dry to eat.
well, there was a little bit. Basically just granules of salt. Uh,
Right.
2 or 3 times a day, a pinch of salt. I was having some charcoal, some salt covered in charcoal, and apparently that helps to clear the digestive system and so on. But that was it.
Right.
But it really did feel like a meal every day when I would place that granule of salt onto my tongue and
Mm.
just, you know, uh, really allow myself to experience that. Yeah, it's like eating meat, actually, having that granule of salt.
Yeah, right. I suppose
Yeah,
the salt is important to maintain minerals in
yeah,
your
absolutely.
body.
So
Yeah,
around more around the electrolytes,
electrolytes. Yeah.
which are really important to keep up. I had also had a natural, basically it was vaporized seawater that had all of the minerals that electrolytes have, but without calories. So whenever you're having electrolytes on a fast, you don't want to have any calories. And I didn't want to play or toy with it too much. There were many electrolytes on the market that have 1 calorie or something like that, but
Mm.
I just went with the most natural option, which had no calories, and
Okay.
then also granules of salt. Yeah.
Okay. And how about fluids? Was it just water?
Yeah, so the first few days I was having teas as well, and the lure of a little bit of a pick me up with some green tea was all too strong in the first couple of days. However, as I was having that green tea, even that became too much for the body, and it was just incredibly obvious that I didn't need to be having any of that. And so after 2 or 3 days, I scrapped the herbal teas as well and just stuck with water, so clean. Yeah,
Right.
9.5 pH water.
Wow. So I'm really keen to know, do you fast regularly? Is this something that you do periodically? Is it part of your routine?
Yeah, so intermittent fasting is something that's been happening here for the last maybe 8 years now. Probably since, I think, in my mid 20s, I transitioned to a ketogenic diet, which is basically placing the body into a pseudo fasting state where you really limit your carbs to less than 25 milligrams of 25 grams of carbs a day. And from that point onwards, I would intermittently fast, meaning I simply skip breakfast, not have breakfast, and it would be a window between around 1 p.m. would be my first meal,
Mhm.
and then have dinner. Finish dinner, complete dinner by about 6 o'clock or so, 6:30.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a routine of regular daily fasting,
Yeah,
but is this 10-day, is this the first time you've fasted for such a long period?
yeah, it was double what I'd previously fasted for. So 5 days previously, and Sarah and I had done a few 3-day fasts as well, and then 24-hour fasts. In between the 3-day fasts, we would often, once a week or once every 2 weeks, do a 24-hour fast, which is basically having dinner, and then the next time we eat is the dinner the following day. And if you're already intermittently fasting, then you're only skipping one meal, which would be lunch at that point in
Mm.
time. But to get
Mm.
into when considering taking on any of these fasts, even a 3-day fast, which seems short now compared to the 10-day fast, but when considering taking these on, building up to it, even for a 2-week period prior with some intermittent fasting is, definitely recommended doing that rather than going straight into, because people have been asking me, well, how do I start and how do I get into it? And intermittent fasting would be the best way to start getting used to going without food for a longer period than what people are used to.
So what's your inspiration for fasting? Is it health benefits? Is it part of a spiritual journey? Like what is it that motivates you to fast in the first place?
Yeah, so initially, and this is 8 years back or whatever, it was all health benefits, and since then what's come online has been a psycho-spiritual processing and clearing as well, and a realization that a clearing of this physical body is hugely contributing to a clearing of the psycho-spiritual realm for ourselves as well, and the noise of the mind and energetically and emotionally and all that. So that's really come online. However, the inspiration for this 10-day fast was purely healing benefits. Mainly, so I started researching stem cell therapy, and this was for a foot injury that was sustained 2 years ago on one of the Yes and Arctic leadership programs. So tore 5 ligaments, 3 on the left foot, 2 on the right foot, complete tears, and they're like, the body here hasn't been able to, say, walk for longer than 20 minutes or go for a jog in 2 years, and for some reason it hasn't healed in the way that one may have thought it would. The feet haven't healed, so seen a few specialists and so on, and rheumatologists had basically given me a life sentence to methotrexate, which is a medication for rheumatology, like autoimmune type conditions. And it kind of, that really surprised me that she had offered up this medication. There was no exit plan, kind of let's reassess in 3 months' time, and I would have to have blood tests once a month for the rest of my life. And given my medical or health professional background with physiotherapy, I was kind of like, this, I was lucky enough to have that. This didn't seem right. And so I went on a route of exploring natural ways of the body is so far superior in its capacity to heal itself, to so far superior to anything that any human could ever offer up. The body just simply knows how to do that. With autoimmune conditions, the body somehow has forgotten that a part of itself is itself, and so therefore it treats a part of itself as separate, very similar to the work we do in the psycho-spiritual world, right? Where we've forgotten our identity. And so basically, I've been looking at modalities that may help the body trigger into remembering what it already knows how to do so well. So stem cell therapy was something that was being researched, that was suggested to me by a good friend, and asked my coach as to whether it's illegal in Australia at the moment, stem cell therapy, mainly for ethical reasons. However, he said that he knew people in New Zealand, America, and Europe, and it's legal in Spain, Netherlands, Germany. It costs about $3,000 to $6,000 per injection, and you might have 1 injection a year. And it's used in sports for recovery from injuries and also just simply recovery. But he also said you may as well do a 7 to 10 day fast because it's free and it has basically the same the same benefits. And so I started to do the research into that, and that seemed to match up, and so I had nothing to lose and went for the 10-day fast. Yeah. Apart from a lot of weight to lose, or not that much weight. There wasn't that much weight to lose in the first place.
I'm sure it's all coming back on. So yeah, well, I'm sure we are all really keen to see how you progress, and what the outcome is for you. I imagine it would take some time for stem cells to generate and for that healing to happen. And do you think you need to do more than one fast?
So the process is that within the 10-day period, the stem cells are activated, and whether it's via a fast or an injection of stem cells, you still require a 6-week period. So even if I'd gotten an injection, there'd be a 6-week period before any significant shifts would have occurred. And so we'll see. Now it's a game of supporting that with strength work and so on and continuing on with healthy eating and healthy living practices and so on.
Great. Yeah, okay, great. Do you mind if we just go into the actual what happened, to some of the mechanics of it? Did you need to do any preparation leading into the fast?
Given that intermittent fasting was already happening, it's always quite easy for us to slip into a fast. What we did do is, or what I did do is reduce. Sarah jumped on for 3 days as well, but what I did do was reduce the carbohydrate content, and mainly vegetables, and and kind of just limited the intake bit by bit. But we were already intermittently fasting, and just made sure that I'd spoken to people that had done it before and what had worked and what hadn't worked. So
Yeah, right. So how long did it take before you were experiencing extreme hunger? What was it like physiologically? And then maybe we can touch on the psychological aspects. Perhaps there were some highs and lows, and what kept you going through the journey. I mean, 10 days is a long time, so I imagine there may have been the temptation to quit. I don't know if you could maybe describe how the process unfolded for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we move into that, I do want to add to what was mentioned before, that although my inspiration for this was, deep healing of this physical body, the reason I took it on, regardless of knowing whether it was going to help or not with that, was because there are so many benefits that occur here, regardless of whether you have a condition or not. So it's worth fasting for any human in Western society because of how frequently we tend to eat, and how much we can eat. Not everyone, of course, but how much we can eat in the one meal. This behavior of overconsumption that we see in other areas of our lives is definitely present with food as well. So and I'd love to at some point talk to the process of autophagy, which is a process that the body goes into. But
cell regeneration. Yeah,
that's right. This is the intelligence of the body, where because you have not offered up the body any food externally, it starts to look for ways of generating energy internally. And so the cells start to look at parts of the cells that have not been used and that are old and maybe damaged, and they break them down. And in the process of breaking that down, energy is created for the body. And so you're simultaneously clearing old and damaged cells from the body and renewing your entire body. And there's all sorts of people say you gain 10 years back in your life by doing X amount of time of fasting and so on, in regards to cellular health and so on. So so many benefits, regardless of whether you have a condition or not, that's happening at this point in time. Yeah,
that's incredible, and certainly something worth exploring perhaps later, even in the in what we do.
Yeah.
within the community and in coaching, definitely.
Yeah.
So if we just get back to
Mm.
the process, can you? I mean, it seems to me like, because you've had so much experience with fasting, your experience would be probably quite different to someone who had not tried fasting before, and perhaps jumping into a 10-day fast for someone who's not experienced is not a great idea. So, can you just describe how it unfolded? Were you like, I've talked to other people and say, look, the first 3 days were the hardest, and then body adjusted, or what was it like, and when did you have a battle with the mind at some point during the process?
So experienced in fasting or not, the experience of the ego with fasting is the same for everyone. And when I say the same for everyone, it might vary, day 2 was the worst or day 3 was the worst. However, in the first 3 days, the ego is kicking up a stink and just saying, where is my food? And it goes into the senses start to become heightened as well, the bodily senses, because actually you go into starvation mode. And so your body's kind of giving you all the tools necessary to find food if you were out there in the wild starving, with a heightened sense of smell and so on. The first 3 days were the toughest, whilst I knew what to expect, but they were the toughest in regards to, I guess, a longing for food. And rather than previously, I'd tried to avoid being around food being cooked, and seeing food. This time around, I thought I'm going to embrace it fully. And so Sarah, my partner, she was cooking really, really delicious meals. And so I thought I'd come in and take it all in and smell it. And she kind of pushed me away, saying, stop doing that to yourself. But I thought at least the resistance wasn't there, rather than like, oh no, I don't want to smell it. I just embraced it and just sat with it. But yeah, the first 3 days were the most challenging, I'd say.
Even being taunted, you were
That's
able
right.
to hold up. So what was it that kept you going, Dan? I mean, how come you didn't break? What was the thing that made you determined to see it through?
So from day dot, if I'd committed to the 10 days, I don't know, something that occurs here is that if I've committed to the 10 days, not completing the 10 days is somehow not allowed here. And it's not even considered. It's just simply not considered. It's happening. However, the biggest threat to that were maybe, when you start going deeper into the fast at day 5, and then unknown territory of day 7 and day 8 and day 9, and there's pains in the body, whether it's around the kidney areas or parts around the gut somewhere, you start getting, well, I was experiencing pain there. And so the mind can go into thinking, okay, have I done something wrong? Should I have been taking more electrolytes, having more salts, too much salt? All of these things, could I be damaging some tissue here? And these thoughts are probably the biggest threat to completing it. There were moments where I just thought, and I'm not sure what it was still to this point, because those I'd be sitting down and those pains around the back and so on would be quite intense, probably 9 out of 10 pain, and I'd just breathe my way through it. But once I'd started eating again, that's gone away. So I'm not exactly sure what that was. But and day 10 was funnily enough, day 10 was the toughest, just from, it was kind of like the mind had realized it couldn't do anything about this, but the body was kicking in, and basically dizziness was coming about, and yeah, a little bit of a shortness of breath, and yeah, I was just glad that it was there was only 24 hours left, and then I'd be coming into my first meal. So yeah,
maybe the mind knew the end was coming and it was trying to get there quicker.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Okay, so when you came out of it, also, so before we go into that, so one of my questions was, you know, how did it affect those people around you? It's quite a big fast, and I imagine it doesn't just affect you, it affects those people around you, the people you love. How important was it to have the support of your partner, for example? Sounds like you kind of, what he said, she was taunting you. But you know, but seriously, I mean, I imagine, you know, it's important to have a support network if you're going to embark on a serious fast like this. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think communicating with those that you will be spending a fair bit of time with, that this is happening, so that they can be aware of it, both you know, behavior might be different, for example, and there might be particular moods, or it didn't really happen too much, but it, you know, there were some days where there may have been a shortness in that sense, in responses, and just low energy, so you know, you go into energy saving mode. So if this hasn't been communicated to the people around you, then very quickly people could step in and be like, are you okay? What's wrong? And so on and so on. And then all of a sudden we're making more of something.
Yeah. I would have thought there would be moments when you might be irritable, short-tempered, you know, and it's important to be understanding that happens and the mood passes at some point, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, so really important in that sense.
Yeah, so acknowledging the effects it has on you physically and psychologically, were you able to function fully as a person, do what you would normally do during the day? Like how does it affect your ability to just to function? Do you have to sit under a Bodhi tree for 10 days in order to make this happen, or can you function? Can you do a job? Can you work? What's your advice around the normal daily routine? Can you incorporate this into a daily routine, or do you really need to set it aside as something sacred?
So you would want to minimize your work, but you can absolutely continue to work. And there is an immense freedom that came online in not needing, say, even the lion's mane mushroom tea to be a little more cognitively switched on for calls and meetings or whatever else, and realizing that nothing was needed, and cognitively he was functioning completely fine, and actually with a whole heap of clarity as well. And so yeah, it's interesting. I think we consume too much in that sense, or we consume more than what we need to, and it's that narrative that kicks in, oh, I need this for this reason. So I was quite surprised that my workload, it wasn't huge, but I still had regular calls and, you know, good 3 to 4 hours worth of work at least a day, sometimes 6. I did get a little more fatigued more quickly than normal. However, I was surprised at the level of clarity and being able to function and actually stream words together, and work quite well, and even exercise, to be honest. that was something that was different to previous fast. There was a belief here that if I'm not eating, then how could I possibly exercise as well? And I had actually, the inspiration came from the chef that we worked with at our recent 21-day breath practice. Continue that throughout the fast.
Dan, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I just lost you then for a minute. I lost you where you said the 21-day breath course.
Yeah, so the chef that we worked with during the 21-day breath practitioner course, he had done multiple 10-day fasts, and actually said that if you introduce exercise daily, just a little bit when you're starting the fast, then you can continue that to quite a significant level throughout the fast. And so, yeah, on day 4 or 5, which surprised me, you'd think no food whatsoever. And on day 4 or 5, Sarah and I went to the national park and went on a 90-minute hike. And remembered that I hadn't been on a hike or a walk longer than 20 minutes in the last 2 years because of the injury. And here I was able to go on a hilly hike for 90 minutes. And towards the end of that hike, even felt like I could start jogging, which I haven't done in 2 and a bit years. And the recovery of the feet was incredible, and the body, and the fact that I had the energy to hike for 90 minutes as well. So
yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
So there were tangible, almost immediate benefits.
Yeah. What's interesting though, having come out of the fast, is that the feet, there's a bit of a bounce back, but like we said, I'm assuming that a repair process takes more than just 10 days. And so, let's see how we go.
So when you came to the end, how did you come out of it? Did Sarah drive you straight to McDonald's and it was a supersized Big Mac meal, or?
Mike, I tell you, I was walking through the streets here in Bellingen, and anything I saw, I would have devoured. So there was a pretzel in the window, those German big pretzels, right?
Yeah.
That, the soup, the bread, I wanted it all. But funnily enough, when it came to the first meal, I actually didn't want to eat all of that stuff, given that, knowing that such a beautiful and powerful clearing had occurred over 10 days. I didn't want to throw it out the window with, devouring all of that other food. So it was a soup. You really want to break the fast with something that is easy for the stomach to take on, to digest, and receive nutrients without needing to do a lot of work, because the stomach really went on a holiday. The digestive system went on a holiday for 10 days, and recouped, repaired, but wasn't used to any heavy lifting. And so just had a mushroom soup with some greens in there, with a bit of broth as well, just for some of the minerals, and I had one bowl. Half an hour later, so I think I might have another one. Half an hour later, I had another one, and then I couldn't stop eating. And that was interesting. When you think 10 days, no food, when it's in a controlled environment, it almost seems okay. But if someone had been lost out in the bush for 10 days and hadn't eaten, you really see it as starvation, right? And when you see it as that, it was interesting to watch how the body was going to respond to receiving food. And the next 3 days, after breaking it on Saturday, I would intermittently fast. So I'd have my lunch and dinner. However, when I did have lunch and dinner, I just wanted to continue eating, just continue taking on the calories, and it was asking for more and more. And it was useful for me to watch, is this mind just saying, give me more, or is it genuinely the body being incredibly attracted to calories at that point in time, which would make complete sense. So, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, just noticing as you lean into the screen, your skin looks really glowy. Is it like a good detox?
Absolutely.
Your skin looks like a baby's bottom.
Skin feels good and clean and clear. Yeah.
Great. So can you just touch on the psycho-spiritual aspect? I noticed in your Instagram post you said it helped. It helped getting through it when you approach it from, is there somebody there? So if we could maybe just briefly touch on that aspect, and then the integration now afterwards. How are you integrating this from that perspective?
Yeah, sure. So that insight that realization that when the someoneness falls away, all that is left is a deep cosmic relaxation. When the someoneness falls away, that's all that's left, just a deep relaxation. And that came through when the mind was starting to conjure up things that may have gone wrong in this process, and we're at day 8 and this pain is occurring, and there wasn't anything I could have started to eat at that point in time. However, I wasn't going to, and so there wasn't anything else I could have done about it. I'd had my water, I'd had the salt, and so this surrender but it wasn't even, who's surrendering, right? It's just the ego surrendering to itself. And it was just this, okay, that's why it's important when I say it's not when we drop the someoneness, because then there's a someone still dropping a someone, but rather when the someoneness falls away, which is, there isn't anyone that could ever do that. There isn't a someone that could, when the someoneness falls away, there is a deep and utter relaxation, even on day 8 of a fast, where there might be some bodily aches. So that came through, and it's something that I think rings true through all of life, and any interaction we have with anything, any moment or situation in our lives where the mind starts to conjure up something being wrong, or and it does this. Sure, that people speak to the usefulness of the mind being able to see where something's not right in a situation, be able to do something about it. Sure, but the amount of time that the mind spends conjuring up narratives that are completely false, 98% of the time, if not all the time, to be honest, because somehow reality is always perfect. So
it's really interesting because just from my perspective, when I learned you did a 10-day fast, my first thought was, holy crap. I as a man, I know I would lose a lot of muscle mass, right? And then realizing how identified I am still with my physicality as a man, and so realizing that at the deeper level, it's like, well, not only is there someone here, but I still identify as being, a man, and how the experience for a man or a woman could be different going into this. That's just unique for me because I was into exercise for such a long time, but I found the idea of a 10-day fast quite threatening, which probably means at some point I should do it. But then been realizing in order to get through this, you needed focus. The characteristics necessary to succeed in what you've just done are actually quite masculine, I would imagine, because it requires determination and focus, and you're focused on something quite specific. So would you say that's right, or was that not right?
Quite the opposite, actually.
Okay, good.
It was the biggest strength running through these 10 days was probably more what we could call a feminine energy. That was the biggest strength, to allow it to simply be. And not needing to do something about something, and just a complete like a complete surrender, a complete opening into the process, and a complete noticing of the journey that this body was going through over the 10-day period, rather than needing to do something about it. So it was kind of, it was definitely more of the flavor that we would call the feminine energy in that sense. And however, I can absolutely see how it could be useful for some people at some stage of development. It could be useful to engage a masculine energy, a strong will and determination that nothing's going to get in the way here of this. And that could be useful, although it's probably the more difficult path, and the path of maybe a little more suffering and tension as well, right? Because it's I will do this. And that has been the way here, particularly through the 20s and through my teenage years. I'll make it happen, and had served me well, and that still continues to be the case. Like, I'll make it happen, make anything happen. However, with this openness, just this kind, like really, really enveloping it with this beautiful open energy. And one of the big things was learning how to receive in terms of this. That came through. That just simply came through in a sitting practice during the meditation. For the construct here that still does not allow receivership to occur in a healthy way, that as soon as we receive, we immediately need to do something about it, but can I do this for you in exchange for that, and so on. And then also might not it doesn't want to receive because it feels that it would need to do something in return. But to actually be able to receive, and that came online on the last day, funnily enough, and the first thing to be received was that soup, and to receive that with openness, which was beautiful. And then the next day, actually, we were at the markets, and so this was a practice to then integrate and make real for myself in the day-to-day. We're at the markets. The farmer had only accepted cash. We didn't have any cash, and he just offered up a massive zucchini and a few cucumbers and a tomato, and offered that up. And I noticed at first it come up as in, oh no, we couldn't possibly do that. We want to give you something. We want to support you. That's what came up. And then the intention around learn how to receive, and just fully receive that. Because if the body and the mind go into a contracted state when someone is offering up something, then we are completely blocking the gift that's being offered up to us, and therefore denying their capacity to give as well. And so it's a practice here. And so that was a beautiful way of life, offering that up so early on in the piece in a really practical way as well.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, well, look, this has been an incredible conversation. It's been fantastic. I don't have any more questions unless you would like to add anything. Is there anything you would like to say?
No, other than, do your own research, and speak to your GP or a health professional about doing something like this. So really get yourself acquainted with what the process requires, and rather than just relying on say what's been said in this conversation or whatever else. And I think it's something that in one way or another at some point should even be a part of the schooling curriculum. Learning how to do this in a healthy way, fasting, along with obviously meditation, sitting practices, body exercises, eating healthily, all of those things. It's something that everyone should be doing, I think, except, I'm sure there's conditions where, and there are conditions where, if there's been, say, an eating disorder or then definitely speak to a health professional such as a dietitian or a naturopath or your doctor about taking something like this on.
Beautiful. Good advice. Thank you very much. Well, look, I'll stop the recording there.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.